y'all ready to head off the trails? I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones, and I'm ready to take you on a mysterious journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails right here on Spaced Out Radio's YouTube channel. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. We would really appreciate the love. Shout out to Bumblefoot for that amazing intro music. Once again, I love it. All right, you guys can please follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. You can find me at thecryptidhuntress.com, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress. Right now, my shop, War Woman Goods, is having a Christmas sale. So you guys go and do your Christmas shopping with War Woman Goods on Etsy and on my website. We have a fantastic guest here at Spaced Out Radio tonight. I have Angelique Benham here with me. And don't forget that right after my show tonight, After Hours has a great program set up for everybody. So let's get to our guest. Angelique Benham is the mother of 3 adult sons and has been an experiencer for over 20 years. She recently became a boots-on-the-ground researcher as a team member of the Sasquatch Sisters Northwest, based out of the Panhandle of North Idaho, and is host to the Sasquatch Sisters Northwest YouTube channel. And Angelique has been on Spaced Out Radio before with the Sasquatch Sisters Northwest. She has so many amazing stories. I had to bring her back to talk with her tonight. We're going to have a lot of fun. So please help me welcome to Spaced Out Radio, Miss Angelique Benham. Hey, Angelique.
Hi. Can you see me okay?
I see you. You look beautiful. Yes, I love your sweatshirt.
I got to represent.
Yes.
I can't see anything, just a frozen screen. So as long as you're doing okay, I'm okay.
Yeah, we're everything is fine. We can see you perfectly. So I hope that my screen is not frozen. So everybody in chat, y'all let me know. But yeah, you look great. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about Sasquatch Sisters Northwest. I know you guys, you ladies came on the show a month or two ago, and we had an amazing conversation about all of your encounters, and each of you has very unique experiences with Sasquatch. So tell us a little bit about that group.
We were actually formed just early this spring, and our founding member was Cindy Goodbrake, and she lived on the opposite side of Hoodoo Mountain from where I lived. And because we were basically neighbors and we were good friends, she was having encounters, I was having encounters, and we got talking to each other and just sharing information as we went along. And finally, she just called me up one day and said, you know what, I really want to form a team. I really feel this is important. We both live in a hot spot, and we both have this information that we can share. And I think it's a good thing that we form this team. And I went ahead and just said, you know what, I think so too. I think that we've gone past just being experiencers, and we should just go ahead and utilize the tools that have been given to us and go with it and help in being able to educate people. Because boy, I'll tell you, when I moved into this area before I had my first encounter, I honestly wasn't a believer. I really wasn't. I had been a hunter, fisher, I've been out in the woods most of my life. And when I finally started having not just one encounter, but multiple encounters, I really, really feel that it's an important thing that we educate people, because boy, it's a shocker. It absolutely is a shocker, and can be traumatizing if you're not expecting it.
Absolutely. That's why I love shows like this. And I used to have a show with Texas Front Porch. I feel like we were kind of a support group, an emotional support group for each other, for all the experiencers, because it is so traumatizing. And a lot of people don't believe in Sasquatch until they have an experience. So it's kind of typical to have that kind of experience. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's all about sharing our experiences too, because we think we're crazy, a lot of times. I mean, I know I'm a little bit crazy, but that's besides the point. But you have an experience, and you just want to be able to talk to people to confirm that you're not crazy. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
And that's where our YouTube channel comes in, because we have provided an avenue for people in the inland Northwest to be able to come forward and share their experiences with people who aren't going to shame them. And we've come across some people. One of our submitters, I've literally known this woman for 35 years. And for 35 years, she was terrified to tell anybody about her experience that was just horrifically traumatizing to her and her family. And when she realized that I knew that these beings exist and that I was offering this avenue, she came forward and told her story, and it was just off the hook. But it's people like her that need a voice. We need to be able to come forward and say, you know what, I've been told my whole life that they don't exist, but yes, they do. And now we're reaching a day and age, I think, with people like Steve Isdall and David Paulides and people like yourself. We're finally reaching a day and age where people can actually openly admit that, yes, they have had encounters and it's okay. We're going to be accepted now. You're not going to be shamed. You're not going to be told it's all in your head. And, the way that it was for our ancestors who have taken it completely uh, as a matter of fact way of life for them. Well,
yeah.
it's only been in modern times we've been taught that they're not real. So now it's time for us to say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay to come forward and admit these things have happened to you, and you're not going to be shamed. You're not going to be told you're crazy, because guess what? We've had them too.
Yes, and Angelique, so you have Native American ancestry, am I right? And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
what do your ancestors say about Sasquatch?
Um, for the tribe that I am with, I grew up on the Colville Reservation in northeastern Washington, which is Arrow Lake's band of the Inland Salish. And for us, there's been elders I know who've literally have told their families every day, you take a plate of food out and you give it to the forest people. And one of the elder women that had actually told me that these beings exist and was trying to teach me about it before she passed away, she told her daughters to continue that. And so even today, every day they go out and they take a plate of food from their dinner table out and they give it to the forest people. And it
Wow.
is, they've literally, one of the elders had literally told me that she would sit down on a log near the pond where they lived, and they would come and sit on the log beside her. And she had told me once that she literally turned to one of them and said, "You need a bath. Go get in the pond." And
The
from what I've
smell a
been
little
told,
bit.
yeah, they kind of went okay and got in the water, washed off. So even to them,
Wow.
even to the elders from where I grew up, they it's a matter of life. It's a matter of, these are just another element to where we live. And
Yeah.
there's nothing about it that is anything that somebody could say is just in somebody's head. It's a
Yeah.
matter of life.
Wow. Now you have had some pretty exciting and just mind-blowing experiences with Sasquatch where you've actually been up close and personal, maybe from a
Yes.
distance, but you were able to
Yes.
see their faces and almost kind of interact in a way with them, if even
Yes.
just by glancing at each other and things like that. Tell me
Yes.
about some of your experiences that you've had.
Well, the very first encounter that I had was while I was kayaking very close to the shore in Sullivan Lake, which is the northeastern corner of Washington State, in Pend Oreille County. And it's a very wilderness, very remote lake. And on one side of the lake is a mountain, and on the other is a highway that loops around and goes back, I think, to Medellin. Um, but it's a very long lake, and it took an entire, half the day to even get from one end all the way to the other. And on that one side, across the inlet, there was a rope swing, and I had my family with me. We had kind of splashed around, stretched our legs, and then I had sent my family ahead of me down the lake. And when I was alone, because I had stayed behind, I was eating my lunch, and I noticed what I thought was a grandfather coming down the bank across the inlet from me, following two little boys, and they were regular little boys. One was wearing, I think, red shorts, and the other, I think he had blue or yellow shorts. I can't remember exactly what the color was, but this grandfather followed him down the bank, and he sat down behind them, and he crossed his leg over and held his hands over his knee, and he watched the two little boys play at his feet, and they were throwing stones, and I had given my life vest to my boys, and so I'm not a very good swimmer, so I cut very close to the shore, and I literally was only like maybe 8 feet off of shore, and I aimed for him, thinking he was just a grandpa and two little boys. Well, as I got closer and closer, I was waving at him, and because I knew he was looking at me, so I waved at him, and he didn't wave back. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd, just because he's staring at me. But then, sometimes people are like that. As I came up on him, and I was just literally just barely far enough off ashore that the branches from the trees were hanging over the water. I was just skirting around those. So when I came up on him sitting on the bank, he was close enough to me that I could literally see his eye color. And
Oh, wow.
I took a look at him, and it kind of threw me, because when I came up on him, I realized he wasn't the old elderly grandfather that I thought he was. He was actually maybe in his early 40s
Oh,
at the
wow.
most. He had a salt and pepper beard and salt and pepper hair, but he was also very attractive.
Oh,
And
a good-looking Sasquatch, huh?
he was a good-looking man.
Or a
And
wild man. Is it a wild man? What
uh,
would you what? I guess I
well,
need to wait until the end of the story.
yeah, what had happened was, is I looked at him, and from a distance I thought he was an elder who was wearing long sleeves and pants, and because
Yeah.
it was such a hot day, I I assumed that maybe he was an elder. Older people will wear long sleeves and stuff on hot days, and that's what I assumed it was. And then when I got up close to him, I could see that he had hair instead of a turtleneck.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he shifted somehow, and I realized that he had hair, that he was naked. And I didn't see anything. There wasn't anything. I wasn't looking.
No,
Um,
no private parts
no
exposed,
private
huh?
parts. I
Okay.
wasn't
That's
looking,
good.
but I did catch a glimpse of his chest and
Mhm.
nipples, and that's where I went, uh-oh. So, real quick, and I was embarrassed and didn't want to look, because I realized that he was a nudist, and and covered in hair, and I didn't want to embarrass him because my first thought was he had hypertrichosis. And someone who has maybe a disability or anything like that, I didn't want to stare blatantly at him and make him feel uncomfortable. So I just kind of looked away, and as I cruised past him, I glanced over my shoulder, and he had stood up. And when he had stood up, he had pulled the branch out away from his face, and his bicep was like this big.
Wow.
And he moved his foot, and when he moved his foot, that outer muscle that joggers get, I can't remember what that's called, but it rippled. And I remember just thinking, holy cow, this guy is enormous.
Whoa. Was
And
it the calf muscle or his quad?
no, it was his thigh muscle.
Oh, his thigh. Okay.
The outer thigh
Hamstring or
muscle.
something? I don't know my muscles.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it's the one that joggers get, you know.
Yeah.
But he had moved his leg, and it had rippled, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, my dad was 6'6", and I remember thinking this man had 2 feet on my dad, and he was enormous, and he was the most muscled person I had ever seen, but proportionately so. He wasn't abnormally muscly where you would think that he would be kind of freakish. He was proportionately muscled for somebody that big. And you know, after I glanced one more time, and he was gone for that moment. And then about an hour down the lake, I had caught up with the rest of my family, and I remember my sister-in-law was facing the mountain, and I came up on her, and when I came up on her, she looked up and she goes, "Look, there's a hunter up there." And I remember looking to the top and the bald summit of that mountain, and here he was walking. He had been paralleling me, and he was walking and looking down at me, walking and looking down. And for the rest of the day, all the way to the end of the lake, he had paralleled me until that bald knob had turned back into trees again. He had vanished into the trees. And there was just something about that it didn't sit right with me, but yet I didn't think he was anybody different than just a person, a normal human being who was just very big and very muscly and had hypertrichosis.
Yeah.
So,
well, I have a question for you. What about the 2 children? Those were not human children then? They had to have been.
No, they were
part of him. They were human children.
They were human children, and they were probably 2 little boys about 8, 9 years old, playing at his feet. And then as I came up on them, I don't know if their mother called, I don't know what they did, but they left and went back down the trail and disappeared. And he stayed there. I do not know to this day whether or not they could see him, whether they were hanging out with him because they knew him. I do not know. I would love to know who those 2 little boys were.
Oh my gosh.
But he had such a protective air about him that he was watching them carefully, like he was making sure that they didn't get too close to the water. Everything about his posture, his body language, to me said that he was grandpa looking out for these children and making sure that they didn't get hurt. I never once got a feeling that those little boys were in danger. Not once.
That's okay. So you just brought up an amazing point. You didn't know for sure if the boys could even see him. Okay.
No.
I find that very interesting because I have found, and this would say that in this case, the being that you saw had some sort of like almost a supernatural aspect to it. Sometimes there have been supernatural things happening in my environment where my son and I could see what was happening, and my son's father could not see it at all. with his
Yeah,
own eyes,
absolutely.
but he could see it through a camera.
Yes.
Orbs. Okay, we had orbs in my house one day that were dancing around my son, and so it just that brings up a very good point. You know, not everybody can see some of these things,
No.
and if that brings in the supernatural kind of element to it, you know.
Yes.
And it may not even be supernatural. It may be that some of us have the rods and the cones in our eyes that others don't. You know, it could
Yeah.
be biological. I mean, there's a whole lot of different ways to look at it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I have found myself through some of the people who've given me reports is that for some reason, I think children have a little bit easier time seeing them than adults. And I think a lot of it has to do with the circumstances as well. I have known guys who have been in the woods their entire life, hunting, fishing, hiking, spending outdoorsmen who've spent their entire lives and have never seen them, but the person standing right next to them has. And it's absolutely intriguing, and it's one of the things that we're really putting a lot of research into is trying to figure out why some people can and some people can't.
That's right. It's something that we need to look into more because I've
Mhm.
experienced it. People on my teams have experienced it, but I have actual video of that happening, and you can hear my child's father saying, "I don't see them with my own eyes."
Yeah.
So, but it's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yes. Okay. And then something else that you mentioned was about gifting them, the family of Sasquatch, with food, and being encouraged to do that. Now, I know a lot of people think that that's a bad idea. But who's to say if you've lived on a property for so long and you've had a relationship with the family of Sasquatch for so many generations, and it's
Mhm.
tradition,
Yeah.
it maybe it sounds like it could be different, like it's acceptable, and um,
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with native tradition as well.
yeah,
Um, Quite frankly, they don't need our help. I mean, these beings
sure,
have lived for thousands of years, being able to
right,
go out and hunt and fish and find sustenance where we can't. They don't need
yeah,
our help. But I think what it is a matter of respect, and it's a way of honoring them in a way um, that we understand, not so
hmm,
much them. I think it's so that we understand because I've noticed myself that when I've accidentally given them food, and when I say that, I mean that kind of tongue in cheek. I found a bunch of canned food one time out in the woods in the area where there's a habituation site, and somebody had dumped this canned food just as garbage, but
hmm,
I'd noticed that the dates on them were still somewhat good, but kind of a little iffy. I don't think I would trust them to eat them myself. Well, somebody
yeah,
had also dumped off a bunch of chickens, and here these chickens were following me around, and I went, "Oh, you poor thing!" And I saw that there was cans of vegetables, so I was opening and dumping these vegetables out for the chickens. The chickens didn't want them, but I came back the next day. It was all gone. And in the spot where the food was, there were two rocks. There was one white
oh,
stone, and there was one small heart-shaped, kind of
oh,
terracotta colored stone. And I
yeah,
went, I know you didn't need that food, but I'm glad that you liked
yes,
it,
and
and
and they
thank you for the rocks.
absolutely, and they probably took a chicken or two. I'm just
No,
saying.
the chickens were fine. They went back to
Oh,
their home.
okay,
Yeah.
well, good. That's great. Oh man, I love this. Okay, and so, but you've had is that your only face to face Sasquatch experience, or you've had more experiences since then?
I've had other experiences where I've come across a mother and a baby and what I would say a teenage daughter coming through the woods. And that was something that really began um, Cindy and I going on kind of a just heck, just headed towards a a rabbit hole that really opened up some very interesting things for us. And that was that I was on a backwoods road and I came across a freshly fallen pine tree, and it just looked like a wall of green, but it paralleled the road. And as I was coming up on it, I happened to come around the bend in the road, and I could see very briefly the backside of that tree. And on the backside of the tree, I saw what I thought was one of the biggest grizzly bears I have ever seen in my entire life, crouched behind the tree. And I stopped my Jeep because I was going to be passing in front of it, maybe 5 feet. And, I've spent a lot of time in the woods, and I have had bears actually come at my rig before. And I thought, if this thing comes at me, it's going to possibly do damage to my Jeep. And so I sat in my Jeep, and I kind of went, do I move? Do I go back? What do I do? And I'm staring at this black grizzly bear. And all of a sudden it started rocking back and forth, and like rocking. And when it rocked, I realized I wasn't looking at a bear, because my first thought was, bears don't do that. When you come up on a bear, it's gonna hightail out of there. This one stayed there and was rocking back and forth, and I went, oh, wait a second. And all of a sudden, I saw a brief movement where I realized that what she was doing, she had her hands beside both sides of her head, and I saw for a brief moment up the side of her breast, down her side, and her hip, and she was sitting kind of, I guess, I don't know if you squatted down, and was hiding her face. And when I realized what I was looking at, I stopped, and I went, okay, this is where the elders told me what to do. And I rolled down my window, and I just kind of stuck my head out, and I just said real softly, I said, I see you, and it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not going to take your picture. I'm not going to try to harm you in any way, but I do need to go past you. And so I'm asking your permission for me to come and pass in front of you. Wow. And I waited. And as I waited, this is where some people call it the woo, some people call it paranormal. I think it's kind of a chameleon thing that they have the ability to do. But I saw that black fur, and I called it fur because from a distance it looked like the fur on a bear. Mm-hmm. It kind of shook, and as it shook, it started turning into what looked like a quaky bush, like those quaky bushes that you see in Alaska. And I went, what did I just say? and I went, okay. And there was just kind of this peace that came over me, and I went, okay. And I just slowly kind of idled past. And as I was idling past, I turned and I looked at the tree, and all of a sudden this little gray head stood up, and I realized I was looking at a baby, probably about a 2-year-old in the way that we would see it.
Oh, wow.
And he was just ash gray, like fireplace ash gray. And just the look on his face was like, hi, who are you? And then I realized he kind of glanced in the direction of where the woman was, like, uh-oh, and ducked back down.
Wow.
And then on the far end, I saw what looked like a teenage woman, smaller in build, but quite a bit bigger than the baby. She stood up and looked, and then kind of had the same kind of almost a guilty look on her face, like, uh-oh, I shouldn't have done that, and ducked back down again.
Wow.
So I went past, and the next time, it was a week later, I brought Cindy in there because we wanted to investigate. And we noticed that behind that tree, there were literally bare spots on the ground where they were using that tree as cover. And there was all these little piles of bones. Now, that first tree, that photograph that I sent to you of the tree with the T, you can go ahead and show that if you'd like. Um, I can't see it from my end, so
I've
if
got
you
it
put
up.
it up,
Yeah, I've
okay,
got it up right now.
okay, that was behind where the women were, about probably 25 yards, and that's where Tanya and I, and you know Tanya Braddock, she's one of the kind of honorary members of the Sasquatch Sisters.
Yes.
She and I walked back in there, and we just noticed that in all these little areas there was these groups of bones that hadn't been gnawed on, they hadn't been chewed on, they had been sucked on. And the knuckle bones, well, I call it the knuckle bones, but basically the joints had been kind of knocked off, and you
Uh-huh.
could tell that the marrow had been sucked out of the end like a straw, but not crushed like a bear or a wolf would do. And that tree, we found that tree, and that was probably a 16-foot break. It was a tree that had a double top, and each side had been brought in two totally perfect directions. And right at the joint, there was a wad of hair, and we didn't take the hair. We didn't even try to photograph it. We kind of
Wow.
went, okay, I made a promise to them that I wasn't going to photograph, them or anything else. And so we left it there. But
Wow.
that place has been definitely a hot spot. And I go back in there periodically, and that's where I went back at the end, and I just uh, give them tobacco offering, and give them just a little plate of some traditional vegetables and fruits, and a jar of peanut butter, because I know that they like peanut butter, and just told them thank you for letting me come through their area, and for blessing me for being able to see them, and wish them well. And it's just been absolutely eye-opening, because that tree
Mhm.
brought to mind that if they're using trees as a way of being able to watch,
Uh-huh.
um, I went around to just took a Sunday drive by myself, and I went around to all the campgrounds in our area, and every single campground there seemed to be that one tree a little bit in the distance away from everything, that it fallen completely parallel to where there was human activity. And
Oh,
behind every
markers.
one of those
Yeah.
trees, there was those bare spots in the ground. Now, after the tree had been dead for a while and the needles had fallen off, then you could see that the grass was coming back up again. But if it was a fresh tree in an area that overlooked human activity, there was always a spot behind where there was uh, sometimes butt prints, and
Yeah.
always some bones that had been sucked on. And this is going on not just way up in the mountains, but the closest one that I found was literally right across from a gas station, a brand new gas station that butted up against the trees. Right directly across from that gas station, there was one tree that paralleled, and there it
Wow.
was. So they're watching, and they're learning from us. They know more about us than we do about them.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I don't blame them for staying hidden and not wanting to be seen and interacted with too much with humans. And I think
Yeah.
that the advice you've given tonight, what your elders have told you, that's great advice for all of us. Just to be respectful and just say, we're not here to hurt you.
Yes.
Not taking pictures, okay,
Yeah.
and no electronics here. And when I go out with my team to go, we call it researching, but really with one of my teams, it's more of just a lot of times we just like to observe and try to communicate and things like that. And I don't ever take equipment out there, not
Yeah.
anymore, because you're
Yeah.
not going to get a lot of interactions when you have equipment, electronics and things like
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Angelique, I
Yep.
was very interested in another cryptid of sorts, another kind of inhumanoid that you have encountered, and that's a potential dog man. Are you comfortable talking about dog man tonight and your encounters?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear about those.
Well, I've had a couple.
Okay.
The first one I had, I was about 13 years old.
Okay.
And
I think Angelique, I think your audio your microphone's dropped. If you had a microphone.
Oh, okay. Let me.
There it goes.
My earbuds fell out of my head.
I thought I heard it fall. Okay. All good. All better.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. The first encounter that I had with a dog man, had absolutely no clue that they existed. I didn't know that they really existed until about 6 years ago. But the first one that I had was my brother and my sister lived in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to travel the freeway from down through Winnemucca and from Winnemucca to Las Vegas, but we would do it in the middle of the night. So there was hardly any traffic. It was pitch dark. You could drive and you wouldn't see another headlight on the highway. It was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I was 13. My brother was driving, my sister was in the passenger side, and I remember just kind of zoning out through the window, and all of this sudden it was almost like a cow came loping out of the desert and started running alongside us, like literally alongside us. And I remember looking at it going, well, that's not a cow. That's not a cow. It had a long tail, and it had very massive shoulders that kind of tapered back to a more thin kind of haunches and stuff, the hind end. And it loped alongside us, and we were in just an old boat of a car, and I remember its back end was its shoulders and top of its back end was equal with the door. And
oh my
as
gosh.
quickly as it had loped along beside us, it veered off and just vanished into the darkness. And all of us in the car were kind of going, what was that? Did you see that? Yes. What was that? I don't know. And we all just kind of went, oh, it's late at night and it's just our imagination. Now, fast forward a couple of years later, and I was a teenager, and I went down to visit them and stay with them for the summer. And I started dating this boy, and he wanted to take me up, and it was innocent, okay? But he wanted to take me up on this one spot that overlooked Las Vegas, but you had to go out in the desert. And totally innocent. We were being good, okay?
Right.
Mom, if you're watching,
you the stars, yeah.
he was being very sweet and being a gentleman. Anyway, so we went out at night, and we got out to where we were going to look at the stars, and we got stuck. And I mean, we got stuck all the way up to the frame. Oh. And we're going, oh, great, we're going to have to hike out. Well, we could see the lights of Las Vegas, so we didn't think too much of it. We just went, okay, we're just going to hike across the desert and just head right for the lights Everything was bright and lit up. We knew where to go. And suddenly we're out in the desert, and all of a sudden we see two headlights coming at us. We're out in the middle of nowhere. And of course, the boy that I was with, of course, he's thinking, uh-oh, we're going to get killed by a serial killer. As it turned out, it was a man dressed in military fatigues. And that's not too far from I think is it Nellis Air Force Base, if I remember correctly, that's in Las Vegas.
Could be.
I,
I'm not
I
sure.
think so. Yeah, I'm not sure. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, he was mad. And we're talking, this man was mad. And he comes up to me and he says, "What are you kids doing out here?" And he goes, "Never mind. Get in the rig. I'm taking you home. What are you doing out here?" And we were like, "Well, we just wanted to look at the lights." And this man, I wish to this day, I wish I could turn back time and ask him what it was. But he told me, he said, "You have no business being out here in this desert at night. Don't you know that there's things out here that will kill you?" And my boyfriend and I both go, "Well, yeah, there's cougars and coyotes and rattlesnakes and scorpions and all kinds of desert things." And he goes, "No, you have no idea. There are things out here that will take a full-grown man down. You have no business being out here, and I don't want to ever see you out here again." And he goes, "I'm going to take you home. Do not come for your vehicle until morning." And we're like,
Oh
"Oh,
my
okay."
God.
So he took us in, did exactly what he said he was going to do, literally dropped us off at my friend's house, and we never saw that man again. And we
Wow.
waited until morning to come get the vehicle. Um, that I do not know. He could have just been somebody who was trying to be overly dramatic to keep us from getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Maybe he thought he was going to stop an unwanted pregnancy. I don't know. But
Maybe. I think he saved your
maybe,
lives.
but I think the way that he acted like he was saving our lives.
He
And
probably did.
yeah, and so that was just a kind of a side thing. But fast forward to about 5 years ago, and this is when I was on the property opposite of where Cindy lives, the other gal on Sasquatch Sisters Northwest. So this is in the Hoodoo Valley of North Idaho, and it is well known. You can hear the story of Hoodoo Valley because I've done a lot of research on it by tapping into our YouTube channel. And on this property, it was near a very secluded, remote lake that was private, didn't have anybody else on it except for me. I had waterfront property. And coming up, it was probably about this time of the year, even because there was snow on the ground. My son was driving, I was in the passenger side. It was after dark, and we're coming up the hill to come up the hill past the lake, and then we were gonna hit the flat spot and go right into my ranch. I had 77 acres. All of a sudden my son goes, "What is that?" And he turned the steering wheel to turn the headlights towards what he had seen. I saw a very brief view of it, but what I saw was an upright being that was standing just off in the ditch on a very steep hillside, standing right on the crest of the hillside under a tree. And it had a barrel chest, broad shoulders. There was something about it that just didn't look right. It didn't look human, but yet it was standing upright. And it was staring straight at us for just a second, and then it turned its head to the side. And when it turned its head to the side, it had a long muzzle and it had pointy ears like a Doberman.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, it just turned on its heels and bounded down that hill on 2 feet. through this buckbrush and super steep and lots of willow and just really, really not anything anybody would want to walk through. And
Wow.
it vanished into the darkness. My son, we went in the ditch because when he turned the wheel, we lost control on the ice, and it took every bit of nerve we had to get out of the vehicle, to get in front and turn the hubs in so that we could put it in 4-wheel drive and pull out of the ditch to get back up there. And it literally, that changed our lives because neither one of us had ever known that these creatures existed, not once. So
Wow.
after that, he really just went hog wild looking for some information, and he came across the, I think, Vic Cundiff's channel, and Dogman, I can't remember what it's called, but Vic Cundiff actually was the one that was able to tell my son what these creatures were. And from then on, boy, we really experienced a lot on that ranch, not just with Dogman, but also the Sasquatch and, the forest people. It was just a very active place and completely changed my life. Moving on to that property was one of the most eye-opening experiences I've ever had in my life. And I lived there for about 5 years. And I ended up getting married, and I left the ranch and moved on to the ranch with my soon-to-be now ex-husband. And he also had dogmen coming onto his ranch, which is in a more populated area. And he had known about it before I ever married him. He knew that these creatures were coming onto his property, and he was literally getting in the freezer and pulling out roasts, and he would unwrap them and huck them at him and give them meat, and never told us about it. And so here I am. I was going to work very early in the morning. He was going to work even earlier, and it was always dark when I would get up in the morning. And my son and my daughter-in-law had moved off of the ranch themselves, and my husband at the time had purchased a fifth wheel and was letting them live in the fifth wheel so that they could get caught up on their bills and then get their own place. And we were all leaving the house before daylight, and my son and daughter-in-law were coming out of the driveway and just past the property, and standing in the fog was one of these creatures. And my daughter-in-law saw it first, and she was like, "Mom, I just saw one of them, and they're literally right off the yard." So what I thought that my husband didn't know about them. So when he came home from work, I wanted to let him know, hey, we need to protect the horses because these beings are coming in, obviously, right into the yard at night, and we've got the horses. And he was just like, yeah, no big deal. Yeah, they come in all the time. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? Well, why didn't you tell me that these creatures were coming into the yard? And he basically told me, he said, well, he was afraid that if he told people that somebody would shoot him, and he really thought they were kind of cool and was trying to make sure that they were protected. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I'm your wife. You probably should have told me.
And the fact that he's feeding them your first of all, chuck roasts are not cheap. Okay.
No.
Besides the point,
and
feeding them dogmen, that has to be very dangerous, because what happens when he quits feeding those dogmen and your family?
Well, exactly. And that was my thought, was considering that we had horses and everybody around us has horses. They had goats, they had sheep, they had dogs and cats. We were losing cats, barn cats that we had. We were losing them left and right. And,
Oh,
we chalked it up as an owl or something like that getting them. But then a couple people down the road had talked about, their sheep being taken. And the field that my daughter-in-law had seen this thing, this being there, was literally probably maybe 50 yards from where there was a family that was raising sheep and goats. So
wow.
who knows what
Yeah.
could be going on there. But the fact that they literally were taking my husband's ranch as a place of safety for them to travel through. And he told me that they even went to the horse's trough and were drinking water out of the horse's trough, and he was keeping water for them to be able to come through and drink out of the trough. And
Yeah.
and I'm just kind of like, okay, um okay, um well,
Wow.
good luck.
Yeah. Well, now are you planning to stay on that property now?
No, I actually, my husband and I are going through a divorce, so
Hmm.
I'm no longer there.
I would let him keep
He's
that place.
he's definitely, yeah, he's definitely
Okay.
keeping the place. He's definitely staying there. And um, I the one thing that I did notice was that he had an elderly dog that passed away right after we got married,
Mhm.
and he had taken him out and buried him in the field where the horses were at, because he was a cattle dog, and it was his job to protect the horses. And we had noticed that the dog kept getting dug up, and not
Oh.
dug up to the point where he was being eaten by anything, but my husband had wrapped him in a blanket, and so he was dug all the way down to the blanket, and it was left exposed. Like,
Oh.
it was very, very odd, but that happened 3 times. And I would have to go out periodically and bury the dog back up again. And it
Oh
was
my
kind of
gosh.
traumatic because, we loved that dog, and there would be big canine prints around it. And, before I knew that these things were coming into the property, I was thinking that it was, somebody's, maybe really big coyotes, or somebody's dog was getting
Yeah.
out. But knowing that now that they're coming into the property, I think it was them. That was
Yeah.
unnerving. It really was. It was unnerving.
Yeah. Well, perhaps they had a working relationship with that dog and they loved it.
It
Hopefully.
could very well been. And he
Yeah.
was a sweet dog, absolutely, just a total sweetheart. So who knows? But now they haven't done anything to the horses. They haven't done anything to the pig. They didn't do anything um, other than I think the cats kept disappearing. But
The cats.
the bigger ones, they seem
Yeah.
to have left alone. And maybe they were kind of taking the meat as an offering of,
Yeah,
we'll take the
absolutely.
meat,
Yeah.
you know I
That's
don't know.
exactly intuitively that's the feeling I get is that's why your husband was throwing out the chunks of meat so that they'd stay away from the other animals. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Smart
kind of get
actually.
that feeling too, is that it was kind of like, here, if you're going to come through and want something to eat, I'll give you this, but leave the horses alone.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
but yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, just to have this many amazing stories. You're definitely in tune. You're definitely in tune with with the frequency of these beings, and not
Yeah.
everybody is. And so it's actually a beautiful thing. As scary as it is, it's actually a blessing in a lot of ways that
It
you're
is.
able to
And
experience it and share your stories.
it is, and I have really been blessed with getting to know. I've met some tremendous people who have helped me along this journey. One of them is someone who wishes to remain anonymous, but it's someone who's been living and grew up alongside the forest people, playing with them as a child. And this person has gotten a hold of me and wanted to help me learn how to communicate with them. And it's been really a beautiful experience, and one that has really changed my life and has really taught me a lot about these people, because they are a people. They might not be like us, but they are a people, and they deserve our respect. And I've just fallen in love with them. And, I want to be very clear on one thing. Not all of them are friendly. Not all of them are kind, and especially the places up in Alaska and some of them down over in Texas. There's tribes and clans of these people, and we don't know what they've experienced from us. They might have a very legitimate reason to not like us because we may have harmed them in ages past. And so they consider us enemies and will war against us. Those are the ones that you have to be very, very careful of. But the ones around here and in places where they are openly communicating with people, what a gift. Those are people that have given you a gift of learning about them. Take that as a beautiful experience, and boy, just go with it and do what you can to learn from them, because they want to teach us. They want to teach us, the ones that are willing to give them respect that they deserve.
Yes, Angelique, and just please continue shining your light on the forest people and the traditions and just the advice. I mean, I think this was such a beautiful show tonight, and I am just so blessed to have you on as my guest tonight. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. Now, Angelique, where can people find the Sasquatch Sisters Northwest?
Well, actually, that's the easiest way, is you can look for us on Facebook at Sasquatch Sisters Northwest. You can contact us if you would like to share a story with us. I have a YouTube channel where I will read your letters and experiences with the forest people from the inland Northwest. So it would be from east of the Cascades, over through across the Panhandle of North Idaho into the western part of Montana. And so if you want to share your experience with our listeners, you can get a hold of me through our email, which is sasquatchsistersnorthwest@gmail.com, and look for us on Facebook.
All right. Well, I'm a part of your group. I'm on there. I follow everything y'all do. And one of your teammates, Miss Tanya Braddock, is in the chat tonight. So Tanya's here.
Hi, Tanya.
Showing some love, showing some support. So
love you, girl.
Tanya's the best. She's one of my sidekicks.
Yes,
so yes. And so, oh my gosh, Angelique, thank you so much for being my guest tonight. Will you please come back and be my guest again soon?
Absolutely.
we have more to talk about.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Angelique. We'll be seeing you soon, okay? And stay safe out there, okay?
Thank you. You too.
Okay, thanks. All right, bye-bye. All right, that was an amazing show. Don't forget that right after this show tonight, join the After Hours crew. They have an incredible journey to take you guys on for the next 3 hours. Next time on Off the Trails, my guest is Marco Polo, and we'll be talking about his unique Sasquatch encounters. I can't wait. But for now, I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones. I'm headed off the trails. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I will see y'all back here next week. Y'all be safe out there. Bye.